What's Underneath is a CastBox original produced in partnership with Studio 71.
CastBox is the fastest growing, highest rated podcast app on both iOS and Android, where you can find all of your favorite podcasts.
You can listen to What's Underneath wherever you get your podcasts, but we hope you'll give CastBox a shot and see for yourself.
Hello and welcome to What's Underneath,
the podcast that will inspire radical self-acceptance through empowering you to embrace what's unrepeatable in you.
I'm Lily Mandelbaum, and sitting next to me is my mom, Elisa Goodkind.
And we are StyleLikeU. In our new podcast, we are going to expand the types of intimate, unfiltered conversations we've been having in our viral video series, The What's Underneath Project.
Each week, we will interview diverse nonconformists about their relationship to style, self-image, and identity.
Being radically honest without shame and holding that honesty with compassion is self-acceptance.
So before we dive into interviewing others, this week, I'm going to interview my mom. Hey, Mom.
Hey, Lils.
How you doing?
I'm good. Pretty good. How are you?
Good. Are you ready for Mother's Day?
You mean to celebrate you for being my daughter?
Why would you be celebrating me on Mother's Day?
It's appropriate that more that I celebrate you than you celebrate me.
Why?
Because I think that it's not easy to be a child and children of adults that, I don't know, kind of make a lot of fuck ups.
Do you think you made a lot of fuck ups?
Yes. Yes, I do.
I don't feel that way personally, but I'm curious to hear why you're.
I mean, let's just say there's a lot of things that. Let's just say there's a lot of things I wish that I had done that I didn't.
Like what?
Oh, like I wish that I was less conflicted about career, and more wholly present at a very young age for a longer period of time, and not conflicted about it.
What's the context of what you were doing and who you were surrounded with?
I was a fashion editor at Condé Nast magazine, at Self magazine, at Condé Nast Publications, and I was particularly at that time at Self magazine when I first got pregnant. I then ended up freelancing for a while you were both young, and for different magazines. And most of my peers were not having babies at all. I had to meet a whole new group of people through having children, that were, with children the same age. But my world of the fashion industry and New York at that time in the late 80s, not a lot of people were having babies. I'm a very intense person. I do everything with wholehearted passion. I have a hard time doing things less than wholeheartedly. And so it was real conflict for me because I have this tremendous need to be creative and to express myself as I did in my work. And then I had a tremendous, tremendous need to nurture and to take care of my children and, completely. And I didn't really like it was a real struggle seeing, having babysitters for very long periods of time or to be doing fashion shoots and trips and taking you with me and leaving at 5:00 in the morning while you had a cold and, you were sick, as an example, and then not being back until like 9:00 that day, in some strange place. And all of that was very hard for me because I have this real deep need to nurture very intensely, and yet also this really deep need to express myself and be out in the world. So it was a real conflict.
Do you think that need to nurture combined with that need to express yourself is still a conflict for you?
I get so much satisfaction out of my work and out of creativity and out of the work of StyleLikeU that when we're in full action and interviewing a lot of people and producing different series and everything and being developing this incredible community, I think, that satisfies a lot of different things for me. So not really. The thing that I'm struggling the most with right now is learning to mother myself.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me?
So it is
what do
a
you mean
really
by
actually
that?
great Mother's Day in that way.
Why? Well, tell me more about what do you mean
Because
by that?
I'm really I'm sort of hardcore in that journey right now.
So
It's very easy for me and very incredibly fulfilling, and it flows really well to nurture other people.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing that. And the world can stop even now, like even for Clark. Like I'll change. I won't. Over the weekend I had him and I won't open my computer.
Clark is a dog, everyone.
Clark is Lewis's dog. And I won't, there's hours that I would normally have gone to the computer or felt like compelled to do work. And I didn't, because I would have rather given him, thrown a ball for him and played with him. And I love it so much that I will make that sacrifice easily.
So what are you learning about how to mother yourself?
But to mother myself is really difficult. The number one thing that has literally been a lifesaver is meditation,
Mm-hmm.
breathing and meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I would do without it, because it's something I do for myself. And no one can do that for you. And it gives me a tremendous ability to feel not all the time at all. It can be very turbulent, but overall, it's very, very healing. It's extremely healing.
Mm-hmm.
And gets my body and my mind and my spirit and everything back into balance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are you most excited about in your life right now?
I'm really excited about where I'm coming to internally, in terms of feeling like a much freer person, and actually fulfilling the things that I dream of doing and being.
Like, what is your dream, like vision of what you want to express through StyleLikeU that maybe you partially feel like is expressed, but not all of it?
Yeah. The predominant dream is to bring this all back more to where it started, where it was about creativity and clothing and the joy of expression, and really just this wild, inspiring, joyful, free expression with clothing that mirrors the spirit and how those two things go together. In particular, I'm really excited about exploring ageism in a new video series that we have coming up. It's a real pet peeve subject for me, obviously, having just turned 60 this year and getting super annoyed with the society and the culture and how invisible we're made to feel that we should be. And I absolutely refuse. I don't feel that way personally at all. I don't feel invisible. I don't plan on being invisible. Though I am more vulnerable than I've ever been, and in many ways have been struggling much harder than I ever have been. At the same time, it's gone hand in hand, struggling emotionally, struggling to to let go of demons, to let go of wounded child, to be as free as I want to be as happy as I feel I deserve to be. It's come hand in hand with never feeling better. And so I feel, this kind of excruciating vulnerability. It's really, really kind of scary. And I think a lot of it has come from the work that we've been doing with StyleLikeU and the people that we've interviewed. I feel I've been so deeply affected by them that it's brought me to this very, very deep transformation, and has forced me to have to confront myself in the deepest way possible. And because I'm a double Scorpio, I'm a truth seeker. I cannot live in a lie, and I believe so much in the truth as evidenced by our work. So I myself have had to, to dig deep inside and to rebirth. So this vulnerability is coming hand in hand, and it's really fascinating to me because I feel excruciatingly vulnerable, like I've never allowed myself to be before. And at the same time, I've never felt better. I've never felt better in myself. And I have absolutely, and I'm very excited to convey that message in a new video series related that where we're going to be addressing ageism and showing how fucking badass being older is and how great it is. And it really is absolutely, if you have your health. And I'm so grateful that fundamentally I have mine, how amazing this time period is.
Mm-hmm. What's amazing about it?
I feel much more comfortable in my body, in myself. I feel I was never able to have a picture taken of me, in the time when, I was supposedly at my perfect or whatever with, the 30 years ago or 40 years ago, whenever it was, like I was incredibly shy and self-conscious. I wasn't able to appreciate myself in any way that I do now. I feel much more appreciative, much more beautiful in my skin, much more comfortable in my body. And I don't really have any sense of being old. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really want to convey. Like I feel young. I feel as much my 16-year-old. I just feel like a little bit wiser. And that's like fucking amazing. Mm-hmm. So you have this incredible gift of feeling great, feeling younger in a certain way, less uptight, freer in myself, freer in my body, freer, less fucks about, how perfect or perfect I don't look. I don't really care. I feel beautiful in myself. Not all of the time, but much more than I used to. Mm-hmm. And yet I have the wisdom and I have the beauty of life. And I have all that I've learned. So it's really awesome. It's an awesome time. So I will not sit back while the media tells everybody, freaks everybody out, and has people doing fucking Botox at like 22 years old or freaking out about, turning 30 or 40 or whatever that is. It is such bullshit. And I refuse to sit back and allow the world to feel that way. I think it's an incredibly exciting process, aging.
Do you feel that your style has shifted, or how do you think aging has affected your sense of style and your sense of expression through your clothing?
I have become way more myself, 10 trillion times more myself. I have much more fun than I ever have before. It's a complete bonanza of time. Or, I don't feel self-conscious. I don't care at all. I do whatever I want to do and however I feel, and it feels amazing. I feel like my expression is every day just absolutely like art.
Is that how would you define like what style is as opposed to fashion? Do you think that style is art, or what?
Yes, I think style is just who you are. It's who you are when you are just your spirit and your most unencumbered self.
So who are you?
Who am I in my style?
Yeah, like if
right now?
If style is who you are, then who are you?
Oh, who am I? That's a good question. Well, I'm always in transition because I get inspired by things. Like I can just see one little thing out of the corner of my eye and that can change everything, which I love. And then I start dreaming, it just changes everything. Suddenly everything changes. Like right now I'm in a phase of, I have been in the last couple of years of just layers and layers and colors and the most opposite things on top of each other, and like a collage. I've been a collage. In the last few years. And I think that's been in rebellion against what I see out in the world as sort of the black and beigeification of society and everybody looking exactly the same. So in rebellion against that, and just in sort of just wanting to express the opposite somehow. I've gone really whole hog into, just literally like being a collage. And of all of the things that I love, from indigenous fabrics and all different kinds of prints and proportions that I find interesting and fascinating or imbalanced in their own way, strange or odd or whatever, color combinations, just like it's like a painting. I guess I feel a little bit like I'm painting every day. Like it can be nature that inspires me. Now I feel like I'm moving more. I'm sort of lately I can see myself moving towards more white and romantic and ephemeral and like kind of like I dream in my head a lot of I'm always doing this. It's always in the back of my mind, but sort of like a Victorian woman and man together or something. Like it's there's just something about Victorian. It's very rock and roll. I'm very rock and roll. I love rock and roll. And I love rebellion, but there's the Victorian, I feel like rock and roll took a lot from Victorians. And I just merge right into that whole, like that. I just love Victorian man, Victorian woman, a little of both. I really feel a strong identification, and I feel I'm just really wanting to be like dreamy and kind of romantic. And it's a little bit less, I think, like layered and a little more white.
Okay.
And definitely a lot of holes.
Why
and
holes?
Tattered, and I love tattered and holes and worn out things, and it just sends me into like another time period. I love the story. I love the feeling of things that are worn. Yeah, they just have like a romance to me.
Do you think that like the way you think about style is like different from most, like and the culture at large? Like, how do you think your perspective on like what like getting dressed should be and can be about compares to like the way most people think about it?
I think I'm probably pretty out there with it, along with my other, I have compadres, and a lot of them were stylists like me. That where it's really very much on their mind and part of their fantasy world and part of their escape and getting dressed for me has been, along with meditation, I'd say is up there like equal to healing. It's a very healing thing for me, the fantasy of it and the hunting for the things that speak to me, and all of it. It's all very, very, very healing for me. Mm-hmm. It's a creative expression that's equal to meditation in healing for me. So I'm probably rare that way.
But I mean, I'm kind of asking a leading question because I really want to hear your thoughts on the fashion industry and what it's done to the perception of style. Like, what?
Yeah, I think that everybody has this inside of them. I feel that when I was began in the fashion industry in the 80s, this was what I saw. My jaw was on the ground when I first started. Each editor at Vogue magazine, they were mentoring us at Self magazine when we were starting. And I was 22 years old and my jaw was on the ground. Each editor was so unique in who they were, and I was obsessed with each one of them. And each person was just very much their own person, and it never changed. They were always their own style. It didn't change with the fashion, or it didn't change with trends. They were themselves. And I was incredibly, incredibly inspired by them. So that still lives very much inside of me. Everyone has that potential inside of them. And I feel the fashion industry since that time has, because of greed and because of giant corporations and brands and needing to sell things and everything about money, has taken that spirit away and has infused a sense of that you need to be like other people. You don't want to stand out. You wear all the same thing, and that there is a uniform and there is a way to be in fashion, and that is wearing black And that is wearing more or less the same kind of silhouettes and shapes. And since, for about the last 15 years, it's the same boot, the same pants, the same jacket, the same color. And that's what people think fashion is. Whereas my experience was the complete opposite, where the fashion industry was all about total authenticity and uniqueness and being irrepressibly and unapologetically yourself. So I maintained that spirit. It changed my life. It opened myself up to what it was to be an individual, to express yourself, to be your own form of activism, to not be erased for who you are, for it to be obvious who you are when you walk in a room, and for everyone to know or have a sense that you have something to say or that you are unique, and which we all are. And I feel that's been really lost in the homogeneity and the lowest common denominator of this culture. And it makes me extremely sad. It's why I started StyleLikeU, and it's why I continue to be very excited about consistently putting out new and exciting content that open people's minds back up to that artist and that spirit inside of them.
It was greed and money that you think changed things, but do you think there's anything else?
They found a way, like it became a business.
Mm-hmm.
It became a business instead of a soulful. It's the same with art. It's the same with music. It's happened across the board, where everything has just become about too much money. How much money do people need? Like it's taken away the soul. It's taken away it's taken away the beauty.
And what do
in
you
these things?
And when you first started, like,
That's why right now I literally am at a place right now where I cannot find one thing to buy that isn't old. Hardly.
Why is that, do you think?
When I find something, I am over the moon, like Bathsheba's dress that I posted about all weekend.
Right, but why do you think that is? I mean, I think it's interesting to hear about a little bit more about like what you feel. I know you often talk to me about like how the 80s and everything was much more bottom up, and that now it's all so top down that like that there isn't a thriving bottom up culture as far as expression and soul goes and designers and how that affects a healthy culture, and how that it all trickles, the trickle down of the top down fashion industry culture and on both our self-worth but also our ability to express ourselves. Like, can you talk a little bit more about what you think what is a healthy bottom-up culture that you seek look like?
Yeah, I mean, what I experienced when I was in my 20s, when I first entered, were not only these amazing people that I mentioned, but also everywhere you turned was another person doing something innovative. Like you'd walk down the block, downtown New York, and there'd be like 4 doors on every block that of people nailing things or soldering things or people, opening up their little shop for almost no money and showing the world something super innovative and something that you had never thought about before. And whether it was, a piece of jewelry that they were making, or whether it was a sweater that they were hand knitting, or whether it was a young designer, making shoes or whatever, anything. Like everyone came here and could find their way here without being rich already. Mm-hmm. You could afford to live here, and you could afford to not have a business plan. You could afford to just be talented and recognized for your talent. And it was an incredibly, incredibly exciting time to be in New York. It was endless discovery of people's wildest dreams and imaginations, people pouring in here to express their wildest imaginations. And it was an unbelievably exciting time to be a fashion editor, because my job was just to find these people and give these people editorial credit, and give them exposure and help them. Now they're all 99.9% of editorial is head to toe advertisers. Mm-hmm. And which is why I quit 10 years ago to start StyleLikeU, because I wanted to do something that maintained freedom of editorial expression and where we were not controlled by money and by advertisers. Mm-hmm. I wanted people to have a space where they could understand what freedom of expression is and what opening your mind to very unique ideas that you had never thought about, even if it was in a shoe and you didn't think that shoe was for you, but you bought it anyway. And then you try to start wearing it, and then it changes your whole mind about everything. And then you change your whole style, and then it affects you as a person and how you feel about yourself. It's all connected. Mm-hmm. And instead of now, where all of those innovative and unique shoes that were made then, and they were always different, and no one ever repeated the same thing. It was never repeated. It would always be a brand new idea. Now the same idea is recycled literally since 1994. I see the same shoes that I bought then. Another designer, and it's a dead designer, that designer's not alive anymore, is making the shoe of another dead designer. It's 3 times the cost, and it's not as good. I have that original shoe. It's not worth it.
But so what do you like? What
so
is,
now I have no shoes to buy. So like, except I do find the occasional fabulous, amazing people like Miriam Nasser, who I buy all my shoes from.
But so, I mean, without getting too much into like the shoe, I mean, what is the issue at hand? Like, what is going on that is created, it's like, where have all the, I mean, they're around. Do you think that these artists are still around, or where'd they go? I mean, what happened to
I think it's very, very, very hard for people to make it because, sadly, because you have to have a lot of money already to start. It's almost impossible to start something from nothing. Our society does not support innovation and subversion. Our society supports conformity. And the same thing happening over and over again. We don't live in a society that celebrates a completely wild and new idea, because then the establishment could not continue to brainwash people into feeling like they need, now it's all marketing and brainwashing, and it's not about soul and beauty. It's about, you need this because you are not whole enough or good enough in yourself, so you need this thing. It's all a marketing ploy and plan instead of just a wildly beautiful, innovative idea. Mm-hmm. And our society doesn't support wildly beautiful, innovative ideas because it worships money. Mm-hmm. And lots and lots and lots of it. And I don't, there's nothing wrong with money. But like, to what cost and to what end? When do we end? Does it have to be trillions of dollars that a company makes?
Mm-hmm. So this makes you very angry, right?
It makes me very angry. But it's not good for my nervous system
to be this angry.
So I don't let myself get that angry anymore. I used to get more angry. I'm upset about it, and I find it very sad, but I'm an idealist, and I believe that you can't crush the human soul. The soul needs to be free. The soul needs to love itself, to feel self-love, to feel anything is possible. The soul wants to live a full life and be free. What makes me so excited is to serve that freedom. And that sense of anything being possible, and that they are free to be their total, original, irrepressible, unapologetic selves.
This is your new phrase,
and that
you've replaced unrepeatable with irrepressible, unapologetic self.
And that is what makes one happy. And that is what makes then a happy society and a happy culture, and a culture that will then produce things in answer to that. So then you will be able to make things that are one of a kind, or 2 or 3 or 10 of a kind, instead of 10 trillion a kind. And you'll have options, and you'll be able to live in a world where not only are people expressing themselves freely, but they're also able to create freely, and they will be supported in that creation. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please subscribe and give us a good rating so the powers that be can keep this podcast going.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about this before, but I've always found this really fascinating. Like, Because I feel like I have a connotation that trends are like inherently a bad thing, and I feel like you have an interesting insight into like what their original purpose and intent was. Because, I mean, what do you think about trends these days?
I think trends these days are just a phony marketing concept it's silly. And they're just recycled over and over again. 70s, 80s, 90s, it's the same. It's like the shoe. It's just, it's not, there's nothing, about a trend. I don't listen to it. I don't pay attention. I couldn't care less about it. I don't see trends. Trends are being created. They've been coming from a boardroom with the bottom line being about money and how can we just keep selling things. So I think they're silly. And they're not important. To me, what's more important is to actually defy the trend. Whereas, when I was younger, as a teenager, when, there was the Vietnam War and there was Woodstock, and we were, for the first time, girls were dressing like boys in corduroy pants or like dragging our bell bottoms on the ground in the mud, refusing to wear, to look prim or be prim, or, just totally exploring, rebelling, and finding out who we are, not buying jeans that are already worn out, but literally rubbing them on the sidewalk to make more holes and to make them as, white as possible. That to me is a worthwhile trend, that it's coming from rebellion, it's coming from self-exploration, it's coming from, our hearts and our minds and our souls, that we don't like the way things are and we want it to change. And so we're not going out to dinner with our grandparents in a little dress and patent leather shoes. We are going to show up in landlubber bell-bottom jeans that are dragging on the ground and very low-waisted, and a mirrored Indian shirt, and our hair down to our waist, and construction boots.
Did you do that?
Yes.
And did your grandparents or your parents
mortified
freak out?
My grandparents, who I loved so much, and I was very inspired by them. I wish I still had all of their clothes and everything now, because they had incredible style. Going to a prom was like, forget it. What's a prom? I think I might have gone, but if I went, I was barefoot and I was wearing some torn up dress. And I went by myself.
Was there ever a time that you have conformed or felt a pressure to like fit into the status quo with how you dress or how you express yourself? I mean, you seem like that's never been a thing, but was there ever, is there in any part of your life that you felt any pressure to conform ever?
No, I don't really remember any. I mean, I remember all of this starting when I was about like 9 or 10 years old, when my aunt gave me white bell bottoms with purple polka dots, and I had fishnets, and that's when it all started. And I would not take those fishnets off. And my parents took us to Washington, D.C., and I was crying from the pain of the fishnets rubbing against, causing my feet to bleed. I would not take them off. And it started, and I look back, when I start looking at those pictures, 10, 11, 12 years old, and when it started, the jeans and the holes and the, exploring masculinity, femininity, I dress almost exactly the same still. Actually, I dress very, very, very similarly to when I did as a teenager.
So what about, I guess maybe you've never conformed or felt a pressure to conform as far as how you dress, but what about in your life? Like, do you think you've ever made decisions that are like more to fit into a societal norm as opposed to what you truly feel inside in your life? Like, what are some examples?
I would have never moved to Westchester.
Right.
That was a very conformist move for me, and was not a very good move for me at the end of the day. I should have gone. Yeah. See, that was a conformist move, because looking back on it, I should have come to Brooklyn, then, and or downtown New York. In retrospect, I would have been much happier, and that would have been a better move than moving to Westchester. I don't know what possessed me to do that, and it was a very, very. I was a real fish out of water.
Like, people didn't understand.
That was such a conservative move for me, and I made no friends. Literally. I literally made no friends.
Why?
I was a total fish out of water. Yeah, it was. My best friend moved there. She was 15 years younger than me, and she moved there because of me, and that was my friend.
Why? So why did you move to Westchester?
I was too afraid maybe to deviate from what was expected and to the norm that I grew up with, even though I was very much the black sheep in that norm always. I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old during a revolution. And we had a lot of conflict with our parents. Mm-hmm. It was very different than it is now, that way. It was a huge, huge generation gap.
Mm-hmm. And so you feel
and it was very, the parents of that time didn't know what to do with kids doing drugs, having sex, at a very, very, very young age. I lived during a revolution, and it was so, I guess there was just the part of me that went back and forth a little bit with that, because there was sort of what I knew. And then there was like rebelling and shirking off everything I knew. And I would have definitely been much happier not making that move.
What do you think is like the biggest risk you have taken in your life?
Yeah.
I mean, the least conformist decision you've made.
Well, it's definitely was starting StyleLikeU. Why
was that risky?
50. Mm-hmm. I was freelance fashion styling. I had just kind of gone back over the last maybe 5 or 6 years and worked my way back up to a place that I was working, and but I had a very love-hate relationship with it because of everything that had happened in the world, all the changes, the conformity, the homogeneity, everything that we're talking about. I felt extremely frustrated, not able to express myself creatively like I had once. And I was pretty devastated, and I was in my early 50s. Mm-hmm. And I felt like a failure. And I only knew that I felt like a failure because my son Lewis confronted me on that. Or, there was a series of events that happened that led me to be weeping in his arms on Avenue B at some point about what a sense of failure that I felt I had been a failure.
You felt that you were a failure just because you hadn't found your career mojo, and was it related to the fact that you had ditched your career when you were young to raise your kids, and then went back and didn't feel like you felt like everyone that you were peers with at that time had just surpassed you and were huge successes, and you felt like a failure.
Yes, I felt like a failure. Most everyone that I knew from those days in the 80s had gone on to become big corporations themselves, or very successful, and
that directly relates to the fact that you decided to be a mother instead.
Yes,
and not a fashion industry mother.
Yes, I could not work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sit in a studio. I was just looking out the window. I couldn't wait to go home. I didn't want someone else with my kids. I wanted to watch them in the playground. I wanted to pick them up from school. I wanted to be with them. It's the greatest pleasure I've ever had in my life. It was the greatest thing I've ever experienced, was nurturing them and raising them. And I made that decision. It was a really hard one. I ended up teaching yoga for a while. And I remember, which I really loved, but I remember when I would take my shoes off, and I would just be in sweats or whatever to teach yoga. But the shoes would always be something special, and I would leave them at the door. And I remember thinking, I need to go back to this. Like, this is a part of myself I've left behind. So I went back to freelance styling. So hard to do on my own, like in my mid-40s. I was doing things like huge fashion shoots without an assistant, lugging trunks, doing it as if I was 22. I started all over again from the beginning. And I had sort of some fun for a little while, but then it was just really, it was really clear what was happening in the industry and in the world, and that there wasn't a care for this anymore in the same way. There wasn't a care for this kind of innovation and this kind of bottom-up wild editorial pages, as I talked about before. And I was feeling more and more and more crushed and suppressed. I couldn't adapt to this formulaic way that it had become, where one of the very last shoots I did, I literally think I had a directive to put literally 30 advertisers on a page. Mm-hmm. Like diamond jewelry that I couldn't give a shit about, cutting guest dresses up and tying it into the model's hair, putting it on the couch. 30 advertisers on a page. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get vintage clothing.
And it wasn't an advertisement.
No more vintage clothing in an editorial, like rules, all those things that started to happen. No more money for things from Europe. And I was finding myself crying and at the fashion shows, and no one talking to each other, incredible amount of pretension and clubbiness and queen bee celebrity worship and hierarchy and front row seats, and everything was the opposite of what I experienced in the 80s.
So back to you were feeling like a big sense of failure, and you were talking about how StyleLikeU is like your biggest risk you've ever taken. Yeah. So what makes it a risk, I guess? So
looking back, failures are so important, and that sense of failure is so important.
Why?
Well, I would have never started StyleLikeU. I would have never, all of the things that just weren't quite right. Like I just was always kind of not quite doing what I was supposed to be doing, but very good at it and loving it. And there was aspects of myself, but it wasn't my whole self until I started StyleLikeU. Mm-hmm. So looking back, had I not resisted that failure, had I embraced it, had I recognized that how important it is to just embrace what is and to accept what is, and how much better you flow with life, because it really is guiding you in its own way, and it's its own perfect, beautiful gift. It's all about letting go. It's all about not resisting. It's all about acceptance of what is. And that's what makes you healthy person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that sense of failure, it led me to take the biggest risk, which was starting StyleLikeU and defying probably almost every odd imaginable. I was living, I had left my house in Westchester. I never went back, living on Avenue B without a fork, a knife, anything. I had plastic drawers. For almost 2 years. I was living like in a tiny little apartment on Avenue B with all the interns and Lily, eventually you, coming back from LA and moving in. And it was, and I was happy as a clam. I didn't care at all. I was barely sleeping. I didn't have any of the comforts. I had no comforts, no creature comforts. I had a roof over my head, but it was extremely minimal. And I was completely dedicated and so on fire. I knew that we were onto something really, really, really amazing. I was so fulfilled. It was the first time that I felt I was in my calling, and I had never felt a feeling like that before. Mm-hmm. And I had no sense of limitations in terms of age. None. It didn't even cross my mind.
That you were
what
in your
age
50s
I was
doing something.
Yeah,
like this.
I just was doing what I loved, and I didn't think about it.
I think that's one of your greatest qualities, if I might inject my own opinion. I think that your ability to be willing to start over and be a beginner at something and not compare yourself to the standards of the culture is pretty admirable. That's pretty intense that you'd start something at that part of your life when most people would be way too ashamed to fail or to be a beginner. And even that you went back into the industry when you did and didn't care, that you were lugging the, you were doing the job of a 22-year-old, but you were 45 and you were willing to not get paid or whatever. I feel like that's pretty cool that you are so willing to start over and that your pride doesn't get in the way.
Thank you. I don't know whether I deserve that so much as more it's selfish in a way, because I just thrive on life, newness and discovery and inspiration. I can't help myself. It's like a drug. you know? So at the end of the day, it's selfish. And I never feel tired of that. I'm always wanting more of it. And I just feel like life is endlessly, has endless potential to offer that to you, inspiration and innovation and discovery. So I just cannot sit back and say that that's ever over. I will never do that. And there's sometimes when it's really, really stressful, like it is very often doing StyleLikeU and being so on the edge, that I look, or once in a while when I come across someone else my age, which isn't often, that are very settled. Oh, they've figured this out. They figured that out. You know, they have a house here. They do this and they do this and they do this, you know, and we don't do any of that because everything is just so unsettled all the time with us and so still moving and unsettled and not owning anything and just living by the seat of our pants still in a lot of ways. There's times that I look and I think, oh, that seems sort of nice, those decisions. I don't know. But I just don't think I had my chart read about a year and a half ago by an astrologer who said it doesn't matter how comfortable I try to make myself, the house is going to blow down and the roof is going to blow off and you're going to be forced to get out of your comfort zone. I just think it's I don't know, it's karma. I don't know what it is. It's just not me. It's not my life.
What's your biggest source of shame?
That I didn't handle Lewis's being gay and your being curvy as well as I could have.
What can you talk a little bit more about that?
Lewis is my son, Lily's older brother. I didn't have any issues with Lewis being gay as far as him being gay, but I was worried about his safety and his happiness. My fears got in the way of being as smarter about it and leaving the door more open. So like I didn't say, fuck this. The door is wide open. We're going to make this work. And like, no matter what, and we're not going to let the larger culture, familial culture, whatever the things were that I feared would be uncomfortable, where he might be judged or not treated well or harassed or any of the things that could have happened to him. I was worried about that. I didn't want him to experience that. So I didn't leave the door open as widely as I could have and should have. And I really regret that. It's embarrassing to say, and it's a deep, deep, deep sadness inside of me.
When you say you didn't leave the door open, like what did you do? I know you didn't really, like you never said boyfriend. You could, you could have a boyfriend or girlfriend. You always said
I should have
girlfriend.
not said, who's your girlfriend? Do you like a girl? Things like that. I should have never done. It was just, it showed itself just, as I said, it was this weird sort of fence-like position.
I think that like an example would be like when there started to be signs or when we started to have intuitive feelings that he might be gay. I think you were a little bit resistant to those signs.
Yeah.
Like it took you a little while to like,
yeah.
You weren't just like,
I wasn't like, yay, definitely what, do you have something to say? The door's wide open, say it. Maybe where he would have said it at 14 instead of 16.
And where he would have been less afraid to say it, possibly.
Yeah, and even
for how close you were, and for what an unconditionally loving and open-minded person you are, I think he relatively still was pretty afraid to say
right, and even very much younger, like now. I mean, a lot of this very much younger. I think has a lot, I can let myself a little bit off the hook because society was just not there and we didn't have the education and the awareness. But I would never have done like sports. Like when I saw that he was running down the soccer field at 4 years old in the wrong direction and couldn't care less. I should have, now.
Encourage something else.
Now. Well, I did encourage other things. He always could do whatever he wanted, acting. I mean, he could express himself any way he wanted to. But I would have never done it. I would have never encouraged the conventional things or anything that would have given a message, some kind of subtle message, like this is how you should be
this way
if you're a boy.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also, we just as a society in 1980, in 1993, we're, nowhere near where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had an easier time with it always than you did. And it was a little bit of like a dissonance between like who you are at your core, which is such a like rebellious, status quo bucking person to have any, but I think that I think if I were to say like your biggest like struggle or flaw as a parent, I think it comes from such a loving place that it's hard to even call it a flaw, is that you just like were so afraid for either of us to experience any pain. You cared so much about us not experiencing pain that you actually you had a little bit of like a short-sighted view of that. So like you didn't want Lewis to experience the pain of, being judged or being mistreated or having potentially a harder life by being gay. So you just didn't want that to be the case. So you kind of didn't open the door to that. And then with me and my body image, I think you didn't want me to have the pain of not fitting into the standard either.
Right.
And so you weren't as encouraging as you could have been of me embracing who I was physically. And I think that it's pretty clear to me that it was coming from this like kind of panicked place in you to make sure we were always happy and didn't have to experience any immediate bullying or pain, but actually like it caused more pain in the long run. And that's what I mean.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that is true. Because I mean, as far as all other things, like, when the teachers in school were saying that Lewis, when he was acting out in 7th or 8th grade and they were saying that, he's not, doing what he's supposed to do. And I would say to them, well, then you're an idiot for not understanding how smart and interesting and engaging he is. And there's, you're doing something wrong. So like in every other way, I was that way. And I think that it is sort of baffling to me a little bit. It's actually baffling to myself. And I think part of it is because, part of it was the culture and the times. And part of it was that I have, just a tremendous amount of over empathy for any kind of pain, especially for my own children.
You feel shame still thinking about that chapter in your life and the way you treated.
Yeah. I mean, Lewis. The only way that I can sort of feel good about it at all is to see how that struggle for both of you has now become both of your somehow the mix of all of that, getting the love and support and the unconditional love from me and how you feel about yourselves inside, combined with my fuck ups, has somehow led to the two of you being leaders in those respective areas, and having to fight through something really hard and, come out on the other side. So I don't know, somehow, even though I feel terrible about it and that the two of you would suffer and struggle like you have, and I could have been instrumental in helping you to avoid that, somehow it's worked out in some sort of weird way. Is not necessarily such a bad thing. I don't know what the message is of that. Mm-hmm. Totally. I guess you just can't be perfect. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. And sometimes you need things to push against. And that's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are you?
And every generation, I want to say this because I think this is important to what's happening now in terms of identity politics and a lot of the fighting that's going on between people, outrage culture and social media and all. I think it's important to recognize that, generations only know so much. And we continue to evolve and we continue to learn. And it's upon us to be open and to make those changes and to learn and to evolve. and not to become closed and stodgy and limited as you age. I have no patience for that. But we learn and we change and we grow, and that is part of evolution. It's part of the natural evolution of life. So we can't fault and blame too harshly, people for not knowing better necessarily.
What is your biggest achievement?
Definitely you and Lewis.
Why?
Without a doubt. Giving birth to and raising two people that I don't really have any complaints about.
About us as people?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That I deeply admire, that I think have great values, that work hard, are very passionate, struggle really and work really hard to know yourselves deeply and face yourselves, to be honest, to be truthful, to live life true to yourselves in every way, to find, to work on loving yourselves as much as you possibly can, accepting yourselves, and caring so much about the world, caring about things bigger than yourselves, dedicating both of your lives to something bigger than yourselves, no matter how hard it is, in the face of not being like so many of your peers, standing outside of your peer group in so many ways and having to withstand that, and all the struggles and the pains that come with that. Yeah, that's my biggest achievement. Breaking the chains that I can't, where we only can break so many chains within ourselves. Like, we have limitations, we have chains. And I feel, incredibly proud of the two of you breaking the chains that I couldn't break.
What are you afraid of?
I guess I have a fear. There's a certain fear of ever getting sick and dying before I'm ready. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel in touch with that more now?
Yes,
with
very,
age?
very in touch with it on a daily basis. I appreciate the preciousness of every day so much. And I appreciate my body so much for tolerating everything that it's tolerated, in terms of anxiety and intensity and fear and all of the things that it's had to deal with me, and still being fundamentally very healthy. I feel really lucky, and I value it and treasure it enormously.
What does self-acceptance mean to you?
Having the courage to go into the darkest parts of yourself, facing them, loving them, understanding that you're all of those things, that you're as light as you are dark, understanding that unless you embrace the darkness, you aren't really going to be able to find out who you really are, and to evolve and to grow and to find what is, totally accepting and self-loving inside of you.
What would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't change one bit. Is that what you said?
No,
I would say.
I didn't say that.
I would say don't change one bit.
You had it right when you were 12, right?
I had it right.
I
had it right.
Rebelling then,
and I kind of
rebelling now.
And I kind of did what I would tell my 12-year-old self, kind of.
You did it when you were 12. You did it throughout your life.
I've kind of done what I would tell my 12-year-old self, only I would do it more. Mm-hmm. Like I would tell my 12-year-old self, do not let your fears get in the way. Go right into them, march right through them. That is your ticket to a happy life.
Are you excited about what's next week?
Yes, very excited. Can't wait to start interviewing all the people our long list of people that we can't wait to interview for this podcast.
We hope you were inspired by this episode.
Until next week, that's it from me, Elisa.
And me, Lily.
If you agree that facades separate us and being radically honest brings us together, Help spread the movement for radical self-acceptance by sharing this episode and subscribing to our podcast.
You can also watch our videos by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using the handle @StyleLikeU.
That's the letter U instead of the word you.
And check out our book, True Style is What's Underneath, The Self-Acceptance Revolution, on Amazon or at a local bookstore near you.
We can't skip ahead to a happy ending or live inside a photoshopped image or an Instagram filter. There's no finding oneself when glossing over the truth.